Hello and welcome to season two of Gabby Hour. This is a special one, of course, because it's the first one that's in the new home of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. For those who don't know, I just moved from Greenville, North Carolina, so we're super excited to be here. For those who are returning, thanks for watching season one. I had such a great and fun time doing it. It's a little bit of a hobby right now, and although I don't have a ton of subscribers, likes, followers, whatever the heck. I just do this to showcase new people every week, share their stories, introduce them to a new crowd, and hopefully get their story out there to a larger audience. And that's what it's all about. I do this because I love to interview and I love to chat for those who really know me. But anyway, season two, back to that. Of course, we're in Pittsburgh. Football season is right around the corner, so there's no better person to start the season off than with this one. He was a former quarterback at the University of Pitt and talks about his journey through the college ranks and now is a color analyst for the CW. So without further ado, let's introduce this guest and give him a nice warm welcome. And I hope you enjoy the brand new theme song.
They fought the law, and the law won.
Max, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time. And we were talking a little bit before I pressed record on this, how we met. And I kind of just start off each episode introducing the person based off how we met. And honestly, short and sweet. I just moved to Pittsburgh a few weeks ago. You had a little bit of a career here in Pittsburgh, and we met through a mutual friend. And you were so kind enough to give me the time to be on the show. So happy to have you.
It's great to be here. Yeah, I spent 12 quick months in Pittsburgh, so I got love for the city. Hopefully your time is awesome there.
I'm not gonna lie, since we've moved, I've heard is the weather, and I'm like, it's been actually nice. So I'm enjoying it while it lasts. I know the winter's gonna be pretty rough. So, but getting right into who you are and what you're all about. You are, of course, right now a content creator. You're on the CW, but you were not always in this sort of social media digital realm in the sports industry. You started off as a five-star quarterback out of high school, right outside Seattle in the suburbs. So I want to hear a little bit about that experience and what got you into football.
Yeah, I can never remember a time where football was like not the key piece of my life. But like played all the sports growing up. I grew up in a big football community, which might sound funny to people on the East Coast or people in the South of like Seattle suburbs, big football community. What? But my it was a public school. We won a bunch of state titles, like some nationally ranked teams, some big time prospects, and that was kind of the ecosystem I grew up in. And so the idea of football not being part of my childhood was like not even entertained, even from the jump. My older brother had a super successful high school football career, and so some of those are like my first memories. He's 12 years older than me. But yeah, I mean, it was ever since the first grade recess, I was quarterback max, and then fast forward until your senior year of high school, and had the was blessed to be able to go pretty much anywhere I wanted to for college in the country. To play football was five-star quarterback, and yeah, it was a blessing, and won a few state titles along the way, and yeah, I always had the fairy tale childhood, or at least upbringing. So very blessed for that.
And quarterback Max, I got to see that on a lower third one of these games this year. That would be a great on-camera name. But you mentioned a little bit about it. Five-star quarterback, no big deal. And not to mention quarterback for the Gatorade Player of the Year in the 2013 class with Jared Goff, Mitch Trubisky. So that is huge and high praise going into college. Was there, we are going to go into what your college career was like, but in those early stages right before college, was there a little bit of pressure with that reputation?
Definitely, definitely. I think it was one of those things where there was pressure, but I think I always had some level of that pressure. Like even if, and I watched the Netflix quarterback documentary, and Joe Burrow kind of talked about this, but like even when I was a seventh grader, like the pressure to, perform then and kind of, be the successful quarterback, or like, ball out in your championship game in seventh grade, like that's all the pressure that but like that was high stakes. Like I was the big time quarterback like in our youth football group. And then as a sophomore in high school, I had to replace the quarterback, funny enough, before me at my high school was also a five-star quarterback. So I had that pressure my freshman year going into my sophomore year. And like in your own bubble, in your own world, when you're 15 years old, like that's tons of pressure. And then you get to USC and you're trying to replace Matt Barkley as a starting quarterback there. And then that's like the most amount of pressure you've had. And Joe Burrow talked about it well in that documentary for those that have seen it of just like, yes, there's a lot of pressure, but it's all relative. And then when you get to the NFL, it's just like, well, I'm treating this just kind of like I did my sophomore year of high school in terms of the intensity. We all want to win. We all want to have success. So yes, there was pressure, but it wasn't something that was abnormal. It felt like just kind of the norm. And I do think at times I probably added more pressure onto myself that was not necessarily needed. But it was, in some way a blessing to have that pressure because I realized, the stakes and how fun it is to be living out the dream of so many young kids being a top end quarterback.
Right. And you speak about it so graciously. It's hard not to have that pressure. I spoke to Seth Wickersham actually a couple episodes ago. He's got his new book coming out in a couple weeks actually now about being a quarterback and the inside mindset of it. And for you, when you were in high school, college, when you were actually on the field, being a quarterback, reading these defenses and things like that, was that one of the hardest parts about performing at a high level each and every day?
The speed of the game was the hardest part for me. I would say the X's and O's, the reading the defenses, the schematics, like I love that stuff. I'm the quarterback nerd in that way. I definitely fall into that bucket, like film junkie, all that stuff. But the speed of the game, so I guess to your point, reading defenses, if those might go hand in hand, but just the adjustment to that next level of like, hey, in high school, this was my internal definition of a receiver being open. But then you get to college and it's like, no, that guy's open. But my freshman brain is like, that guy looks covered to me. But then you got to get used to like throwing receivers open and what a window looks like. And, completions don't come as easily in college. And every guy has a different adjustment period to that. I say this point a lot in my content, but, two guys that I play with that did not have that adjustment or made it look easy, I'll say, are Sam Darnold and Kenny Pickett. Those are the two true freshman quarterbacks that I played with that I was like, man, they're not having that true freshman grow up period that I've seen myself and every other true freshman quarterback have. And then sure enough, I think it's not a, it's there's a correlation to why they are first round quarterbacks, 3 years after that point, because I think they make things that are difficult and that adjustment period, which is difficult for most quarterbacks, look really easy.
For sure. You mentioned a little bit about it, your love for film. And I want to go into segueing a bit. We'll get back into college and on-field stuff, but segueing a bit to now this love of on-camera content and things like that. It started with the film sessions, right? And you're kind of uh decompressing things and putting it into one thing that people like me can actually understand it.
I respect the research you've done because you're spot on, and people oftentimes kind of forget about that chapter. It's, nowadays it's like, oh, you play quarterback at USC, like for sure you're a broadcaster. Of course you are. But in those early days, it was, yeah, the fall of 2018. I was trying to rehab my shoulder and give one last run to pro football. But then in the afternoons, I'd film those YouTube videos, and that's when Dan Orlovsky's career had just taken off the year before, where he was doing breakdowns like in his basement on Twitter at the time. And I saw that and I was like, I can do that. And what happens if I overlay a notch more production value to help the viewer? And it didn't take off like Dan's, I'll be honest with you, but it did take off enough to get a little bit of a niche following. And then that was kind of my foot in the door for getting on radio shows here and there within like West Coast Pac-12 football, that's what I was breaking down. And then most importantly, and Gabby, you'll appreciate this, is those YouTube videos allowed me to package together a broadcasting reel, which I didn't have having played football. I didn't go to like journalism school or any of that. But then that broadcasting reel allowed me to take this a step further. I played a 6 a.m. pickup basketball game at the YMCA in New York City when I was living there the year after, and was playing with my now agent. So I met him there and was able to kind of show him, hey, here's my broadcasting reel. And then I got my foot in the door with SiriusXM and a network called Stadium on that broadcasting reel, which, hey, it was kind of janky. I had corded headphones. I'm in my kitchen breaking down X's and O's film. but I think there's a certain grit that shows through that, or a certain work ethic, or a certain love for the game that I think decision makers appreciated at the time, especially when X's and O's content was a little bit more. It wasn't as mainstream as it is now, and so yeah, that's kind of my backstory. The YouTube videos got my foot in the door with all this broadcasting stuff.
Before you said it, I was thinking the word. That's so gritty. And I love that about you because also getting back into a little bit on the field stuff, you were a gritty player. And I've listened to a couple of your interviews and podcasts and things like that you've been on in the past. At one point, when you were at USC for those 3 years, at one point during those years, you said to yourself, I don't want to transfer because I just want to ride this out. I don't want to be a quitter. And when you were going through that, do you look back at it thinking maybe you should have changed your mindset, or are you thankful that you had that mindset?
I think it's a byproduct of just a different era. I mean, the era that I was in was, and maybe I took this to the extreme, but I still think there was some connotation that like if you transferred, something was wrong with you, or the subtle connotation that like you failed kind of thing. And maybe that's me just being too hard on myself. And maybe it was even 5 years before or before me, but like that was very much the connotation. It was not transferring was not as widely accepted as it is now, especially given the transfer portal. So I don't regret that decision, but I do think it would have been way different had my circumstances from 2013 to 2016 transpired today. I think it would have been different monetarily. I think I would have got offered money from other schools to leave USC, and that in itself might have made me leave. Just if we're being honest, for quarterbacks, it's life-changing money nowadays. But I felt like I needed to stay because the whole time I was, or it was a smart decision to stay, I should say, because the whole time I was one play away from being the starter, one injury away from being the starter. You know, Cody Kessler, that first year I backed him up, went like 35 touchdowns, 5 picks. He could have easily gone to the NFL that year. He decided to come back. And like, if that decision goes differently, maybe that, my trajectory goes differently, but I don't regret it. I think, part of my story is that every single quarterback that I battled with in college ended up being an NFL starting quarterback. And that's just kind of that's what you sign up for when you go to USC. And then the Pitt Panthers had a good run there too of Kenny Pickett and Ben DiNucci as well.
Yeah, that's such a flex. Like I was the backup to Sam Darnold, who just the year after was the third overall pick. I mean, you can't ask for anything more except for again that grit that you had in your spirit. So, going into your final year at USC, you actually did get the starting role and had a couple good games under your belt until it was unfortunately given to Sam Darnold. Can you take me back to that moment in time and how you look back at it now as someone that's a professional in a field who maybe even talks to quarterbacks currently?
It's a great question. And I think if there's ever USC fans watching this, I don't know, good games might be a stretch because we got blown out week one versus Alabama,
You
but
want to
people
be
remember
too
that 26,
rash.
yeah, that 2016 team, that was like Jalen Hurts' coming out party. And that 2016 Alabama defense, I mean, 9 years later, a lot of those guys are still playing in the NFL, which is, I mean, the majority of those starters are still playing in the NFL, which is wild. But yeah, I mean, those first 3 games, it was Alabama and then Utah State, which we won and did solid there, and then faced a Christian McCaffrey top 10 Stanford team and got beat there. And it was difficult. I mean, that was the lowest point of my college career, even more so than when I got hurt a year later at Pitt and had a season-ending injury because you just put so much of your life into that moment. It's not just the 4 years behind the scenes, like working for that, but my quarterback journey really starts when I'm 5 years old. And to answer the second part of your question, that's one thing that I try to remember as a media member and as a broadcaster that like every year there's another quarterback we're covering, another recruiting class we're covering, there's another top receiver, there's another whatever. But for that kid in the shoulder pads, that's his one shot. He gets one shot at this thing. And it hit me last year. I called the NC State game when Grayson McCall got hurt and like off on a stretcher, super scary moment, parents running down to the field, and he ultimately had to medically retire after that. And it's weird because as the broadcaster, you call that moment, you take space for that moment, but then you naturally just kind of commercial break and move on because you have to do that. And it hit me in some type of way of just like as a broadcaster, I want to make sure the viewer knows that like okay, yes, there's going to be another NC State quarterback the next year, but for him, that's his one shot, and it's brutal and it's cutting edge, and trying to verbalize that and dictate that for the viewer because I get the deal. I mean, I talk to USC fans that have been fans for 25 years, and Jaden Maeva, their quarterback this year, is just the 17th quarterback they've seen. But for him, it's his life pursuit here, and I try not to ever lose track of that.
Thinking to the pros now, when you're a fan or you're an analyst and you're seeing some quarterbacks struggling, for example, someone that comes to mind is Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers, sat out a couple games, was the starter for a bit. How do you relate to that, and how do you kind of vocalize that as a content creator too? Because you do a lot with pro breakdown as well.
Yeah, two things. I think one, Bryce deserves a ton of credit for mentally sticking with it because I remember when I got benched at USC, I mean, I was checked out. I was a guy that was locked in, but I was very much like, I'm not studying the extra film. Like, I'm gonna go to the facility and then get me home. And not in like a poor me, I'm a cancer to the team situation, but it was just like I don't want to be here. And it was funny, like, I started talking with Pitt like midway through that same season. So then your mind starts going to the next year and it's tough to stay focused. So I commend Bryce for sticking with it. It's probably a little bit easier when you're getting paid millions of dollars and it's your job to stick with it. But still, I think that is not easy. But then to the content side, I do think it's cool to see, and to your content side and how I relate to it, it's cool to see that the football world has now shown, whether it's Bryce Young or Sam Darnold or hopefully now Daniel Jones this year or Geno Smith, that then, hey, if you do get benched or it doesn't work in the first try, it's not a death sentence. And I think it's on the quarterback to stick with it, stay the course. Baker Mayfield's another guy, but I think that's been a cool um, realization in the football world the past few years that, again, if it doesn't work out the first shot, you can get benched and still get back in there. You can, hey, keep your head down and keep grinding, and maybe you land at the next team and things work out. It's not a death sentence, which I think is great. And that was not the case 10 years ago. 10 years ago, even if it was college for the most part, if it didn't work at your first stop, man, it was tough to find success at the second stop. And I look at like a Joe Burrow transfer story or a Jaden Daniels transfer story, and those guys are two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that didn't have success at their first college stop, which is wild, but obviously encouraging for quarterbacks that might be getting the short end of the stick at their current spot.
Crazy seeing things unfold, and even crazier that you're right there in the thick of it, able to share these stories and kind of break it down. And going into your transfer story, finally, you went to Pitt, as you mentioned, for that final year. Short and sweet with an injury, but you got ACC Player of the Week, so a little improvement here. But after that, you got invited to a Steelers workout. I was actually on my bike. I live in Station Square. We are on the bike path to Southside, and I passed the facility. Pitt and Steelers facilities are right here. So the fact that all you had to do was walk across the street and go into the facility and show what you got, that's first of all incredible. But also, can you take me back to that day and kind of just go through what was on your mind, and was that like your last shot at maybe making the pros?
Yes, at least that was my mentality. That was what was on my mind is, I got to a point of rehab an injury for like 18 months and it was a workout just before Christmas. So, football fans will know like the calendar year quickly turns to the next draft class, like right after that. And so I kind of felt like it was now or never for me. Again, rehabbing a right shoulder injury as a right armed quarterback. And my mindset was like, it's kind of now or never. This is your one shot. But then the noteworthy takeaway from that day is I remember just riding on the bus back to the airport, and you wouldn't have got this out of me then. But I remember looking out the window and being like, yeah, that's probably the last like competitive throw that I ever make. I knew there was a throw. I was sitting on the right hash. They asked me to throw like a 20-yard comeback to the left hash, and I like got it there, and it was fine. But I knew, oh baby, my arm's gonna be super sore the next day, and it wasn't where it was, 2 years earlier than that. And I felt like I'd given everything I had to football, and ironically, I had a workout with the Commanders the next year because it was like, or the next day because it was already on the schedule. But I think looking back, that Steelers workout, that throw, that bus ride was where internally, deep down, I was like, yep, this is probably the end of the road for me.
Man, and that's again a tough pill to swallow because you've only known football your entire life. But now that this kind of digital media age started growing, especially in the 2019s and going on during COVID, it blew up. So for you, starting those YouTube videos, also I did my research, of course. You actually announced a couple of the scrimmages at Pitt, so found a little love there for being an analyst early on. Did you have a plan to go the TV route and be a color analyst?
I had a interest and a intrigue in the industry and something that I knew it was something I wanted to pursue, but I didn't have like a clear-cut plan of attack. If anything, I viewed it as somewhat like I needed a main career and then this would be supplemental to the main career. I had told myself which it took me like 6 years to figure out that this is not swingable. But I told myself that, hey, I'll have like a normal career, and then in the falls, I'll do football coverage, and I'll be able to like scale back my normal career and go kind of all in to the during football season to the football content. A lot easier said than done. I did that for like 2 seasons of like trying to work two jobs and whatnot, and then ultimately funny enough, like this time last year, I quit my day job working in commercial real estate to go all in on the content grind.
I would assume you're no stranger to the content space because as a true follower of your wife, who, for those of you who haven't seen it, please check it out. She's incredible. But again, another college athlete kind of transformed her journey into something positive on the social media space. And I want to ask you, did she help you kind of form this content creating space for yourself?
Definitely, definitely. I think the biggest thing that she helped with is just like proof of concept. Like I've gotten a front row seat every day to how someone makes a income being a content creator. And if I was not married to her or if I didn't have that exposure, I probably would have convinced myself that it wasn't possible or wasn't feasible or yeah, all those different things. So yeah, I think the proof of concept, the encouragement. I mean, we'll ideate on different content ideas every once in a while. I'm not saying she knows the nuances of football and all that, but like content strategy, for sure, for sure. And I think again, being able to be married to someone who does it as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that have a negative connotation with content, being a content creator and all that. I think it's helpful having like someone in your corner that is doing a similar cadence that you're doing.
For sure. And now getting into your shows at the CW, take me back to the first moment that you found out that you were chosen as a color analyst for these Saturday football games.
It's a great question. Never been asked that. I was walking a track at the middle school nearby my condo, and my agent called me, and I kind of knew I was in the running, but I wasn't totally sure. I was talking with a couple other networks, and so you're trying to piece together the jigsaw puzzle about what that looks like, and I never had a full slate of games. So I called like one game in 2020 and then like three in 2021 and three in 2022 and then six in 2023. And so the jump, as you know, from like, hey, just kind of piecing together different games to like a full-on package is a big deal. And so it was awesome. And, definitely validation for the work that I had done 5, 6 years earlier, and validation for showing up every week on the social media front as well, and also just validation and kind of what the reason I got into this is I was like, you know what, I feel like I feel like I'd be good at this. I feel like I'd be good at talking about the game that I love, but distilling it down for the everyday viewer and kind of having a blank canvas every single Saturday to draw the picture of the game that you want the viewer to enjoy. And I love that way of framing calling games and of all the things that I do in the content space and the broadcasting space, being on the booth in Saturdays is my favorite thing to do. And so I was stoked to say the least.
And you're either sitting at home watching the games or you have the best seat in the house and you're narrating the games. So what could be better? That's
Exactly.
awesome. Now,
Exactly.
one of your mottos that I see a lot on social media from you is failing my way to success. Looking back at everything, what would you say failing your way to success has looked like in the shortest, kind of the shortest summary of kind of this interview and also just who you are now and looking back at everything?
For sure. And it's funny, I was thinking about actually changing that because that's been in my Instagram bio for probably 8 years, and it was probably more relevant, 4 years ago, but still relevant and still very much part of my identity, and it's cool. I talked with the Elite 11 quarterbacks, the top 15 quarterbacks in the country a couple weeks ago, and I shared a message to them that's kind of the answer to your question of like, I just look back on my career and there's been events in my life that have not gone my way, but the way in which that thanks to the people around me and, I'm grateful to have, a great supporting cast, but the way in which I handled those negative events had a ripple effect for me later on in my life that then has helped benefit my life. And a few examples for you is like, when I lost two straight competition battles early on at USC, and then that third off season, I was frustrated, wasn't playing well. Long story short, we did like a Navy SEAL workout where we went to Joshua Tree, which is like this little remote desert land in Southern California. And long story short, dominated that workout, was like carrying logs up my back and all that. Fast forward 8 years later, and Cal's head coach Justin Wilcox walks in on my first day working for CW and goes to all my bosses in the room, like, there's a story you guys should know about this dude you just hired. One of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my coaching journey. It was this Joshua Tree workout, and he like walks through this Navy SEAL workout. And so it's one of those things when I was pissed about how I was playing in my football career 8 years earlier, for that to be the first impression with my CW team, it worked out. Another example is like my first job out of college or out of football was working for a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk. He's big in like the social media content world. And I got that job because of an introduction from Sam Darnold, who was the guy that I got benched for. And so there's a lot of people that might like, go poor me or like screw that guy. He's living my dream life. Like took the high road on that. Sam's a good dude, buddy of mine still, helped me get that first job. And I use like three more examples of that of how I got my first USC radio gig and all that. It sparks from kind of how I was handling my business behind the scenes, even when things weren't going well in my life, which in terms of failing my way to success, it feels like those kind of are related a little bit.
Bunch of full circle God moments. I love it.
No
My
doubt.
last question for you, Max. Heading into this year's football season, who are you most excited to watch, commentate? Anyone?
Michael Penix. I have been carrying the Michael Penix Jr. torch for a couple of years now. I was on record 5 minutes after he was drafted. I was in like the 2% minority that was like, I actually think that's a good pick. And the rest of the world thought it was the dumbest pick ever. And I'm excited to see him play this year. I feel like in the more present moment, people just skip over him, right? They talk about Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, and they go Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, and we forget there's a guy in the middle there. I think Michael Penix would have been the first overall pick in this year's draft if he had gone out, like if he had the year he had at Washington and then he went out in this year's draft. And so he's a guy we're sleeping on. The Falcons have a lot of weapons. He's the guy that I think I'm most excited to watch.
Well thought answer. I love it. Thank you so much, Max, for being on the show. All of his information will be in the description. Check him out on social media, the CW on Saturdays, starting in the college football season this year. Max, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Gabby.